And we are live on the YouTube.
All righty. Welcome everybody to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. It is Tuesday, March 18th. And we are here. We are throwing it back to the FY26 budget and some conversations that we had as a committee and with the Department of Corrections. Feels like a lifetime ago about the FY26 budget. So, Commissioner, we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves.
Great.
Then we always ask everybody in the room to introduce themselves, and then we'll turn it over to you for the record. So, I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester.
Scott Campbell from St. Johnsbury.
Richard Bailey, Memorial 2.
Tomorrow, Wyndham, Windsor.
Michael Southwood, Caledonia 2.
For Howland, Rutland 4.
Territory, Washington 2.
Brad Buckner, Tipton 13, Burlington.
Laura Spillia, Wyndham 2.
Jack Walker, Committee Assistant.
All righty.
Amelia Summer with DOC.
Isaac Dano, GSC Policy Director. Zaka Qualities for the BCBB.
Super.
Kevin Winter with Corrections and Institutions.
All right. Welcome. Okay. For the record.
All right, I'm Commissioner Nick Dummel, the Commissioner of Corrections for the state of Vermont.
Great. So we are curious to hear your update on where things stand. I know there had originally been an appropriations request, and our committee submitted a letter to folks recommending that you work with ABS. And that is the last we discussed this. So
That's right.
we'll turn it over to you because it sounds like there's been a lot of progress.
Yeah, so we were able to, we testified both here and in-house corrections about the need for wireless internet within correctional systems. So we continue to believe that is probably the highest priority need in our correctional system today. We've spoken extensively with partners across the state on this topic. Service providers who work in our facilities, with our staff, with the incarcerated population. And I think it's a universally held belief that correctional systems need Wi-Fi in order to advance and continue to modernize. When we talk about this, we like to highlight that there's a variety of ways that we're being held back right now because we don't have wireless access in our correctional systems. And that fits in two different categories. On our staff side, this is really the biggest thing holding us back from our ability to automate tasks, to introduce new technology to help with our staffing crisis. And this is one of the top priorities of the governor when we talk about the correctional system, is trying to resolve and improve the workforce crisis in corrections. And we've talked to him extensively about the different ways that we're held back. And until we get wireless technology in the system, we're not going to be able to automate tasks. And I'll tell you in a minute some of the things that we can't do because we don't have them. But it also applies to the incarcerated population side. There are significant efforts underway to increase the vocational and career technical education training that happens in correction systems. That's dependent on wireless internet. We have a $5 million federal earmark to provide free community college education to the incarcerated population and to our staff in correctional facilities across the state. And that's held back because we don't have wireless internet for our staff to be able to use and for CCD instructors to be able to use. There's some other ways that I think it'll benefit the population, but I guess the crux of what I'm saying is the wireless internet system is really an opportunity to modernize correctional systems across the state, and it will benefit everybody who lives there and everybody who works there. So we were able to meet with ADS after our testimony here and in-house corrections. This is a project that's been going on for about 3 years now. And knowing there's been some turnover at ADS, we wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page with us. There are a couple of updates that we're going to make collectively on the administration side. But in general, I think the project is moving forward. We have the support of the governor. We have the support of the ADS secretary, our own secretary of human services. And I think everybody's in lockstep on this project. So I want to tell you a couple of things that we can't do today because we don't have Wi-Fi. And then I want to make sure that we address any questions or concerns that you have and drill into any of the issues that are maybe holding us back at this point. So currently all facility records are kept on paper. So paper logbooks where staff members writing in pencil. I did my tour at this time. I had an event in my unit at this time. None of that data is captured. It sits in logbooks on the shelf. We have the opportunity right today to switch to digital logbooks where we're capturing that data, where we can see when an officer does a tour of his unit, visits with an incarcerated person, make sure that they're alive, make sure that they're doing well. But we can't do that without wireless internet in our facility because there's nothing for it to connect to presently. This type of antiquated technology we're finding is increasingly alienating the younger staff that we're trying to recruit and keep and retain in our system. But the technology they experience in their everyday life is in no way mirrored by their work experience. And so they're coming into old antiquated buildings using pencil and paper when their whole life has been accustomed to using modern technology, tablets. I see many of them in this room, cell phones, things of that nature. It also prevents our ability to automate tasks. And so many of the tasks that we have to perform today are manual tasks. And there is ways to automate this. I'll give you an example. When an officer comes in for their shift, they go to the main control and they need to check out a variety of equipment that they then carry with them throughout their shift. That radio, for example, OC spray, things of that nature. Right now, they go to main control and they're handed one thing at a time and an officer fills up. Okay, in the key book, I'm going to write down that officer so-and-so got keys. Next logbook. Again, we're not tracking any of the inventory that we have in our system in a database. But there are ways today that we could use a database system where one officer comes in, they're handed all their equipment, and that's logged in the system automatically. We're able to see who checked what out at what time, when. If we're missing something, we know where to look. We also have a statutory requirement to launch body cameras for correctional officers. The way that most systems have their body cams set up is they connect both to a system when they're put back in a port, but also through wireless internet, so that if an event is happening, the video feed that's captured on there is sent back through the internet. So there's preservation of those records. That body cam system we expect to go online in the next several months. But without wireless internet, the only way we'll catch the video is when we bring the device back and put it in its port. I don't know how closely you've been following the events in New York recently, but New York State Corrections had a major event in which an incarcerated individual died, and the only way that they were able to determine what had happened in that situation was because they captured body cam videos from multiple body cameras. And so if we want those products to have the efficacy that we expect, we also need the technological infrastructure to support that. We also have many opportunities for staff to go through additional training, both at our correctional facilities and through the Community College of Vermont, which is supported by the federal earmark. That work can be done at facilities, but we need the ability to connect to the internet. Much of that work is done through remote access, either through screens, or through computers and laptop devices. That can't be done if they're not able to connect to the Wi-Fi. So an officer could be sitting in Springfield at one of our facilities and taking classes from our academy, which is in Lyndonville, remotely. But that type of work isn't done right now because CCB isn't connected to any type of wireless system in our facilities. We also have integrated them into our academy, and we're looking to do virtual academies. One of the things that we've heard a lot, particularly from staff joining at the Chittenden facility, the women's facility, is our academy is 6 weeks long and it's in residence. That means people have to leave their lives for 6 weeks to go to the academy. But we could offer virtual academies around the state where the officer could go to the nearest facility and be in the academy, which is happening in Lyndonville, but from their local facility. All of those opportunities are sitting on the table ready for us to seize, but we're held back because we don't have wireless internet. So those are some of the things that staff would immediately benefit from. On the population side, I wanted to highlight one of the things we've been exploring for a number of years is medical alert bracelets. They look very similar to an Apple Watch, if you're familiar with that. And they basically just track heart rate and sometimes oxygen saturation levels. But they give us a real-time tipper if somebody isn't having a medical crisis. All of that technology relies on wireless internet. And so we've not been able to move forward on that type of real-time trigger for somebody who's either self-harmed or is in a fight or is having a medical event. Whereas now we have an officer walk cell to cell every 15 minutes in our special observation units to make sure everybody's doing okay. We will continue to do that. But if we know 14 minutes before they're going to go for their observational tour that somebody's in distress, that's 14 minutes that we can cut down and provide emergency services to them. These are the types of things that when you have a system that does not have internet ubiquitously available to the staff, we can't move forward on many of these projects. At the end of the day, from the governor's perspective and from ours, this is a workforce issue for us. We are unable to move forward on many workforce initiatives because we don't have access to this. And that's why he's put such a high premium on this. It's why the department has been pushing this so hard. But I'll pause there because I know you guys have some specific questions that we can talk through.
I just have one. Can you explain a little bit? We heard this earlier, but the request has gone from 3 million to 1 million.
Yeah, so that's in recognition. When we designed the original request, the idea was that we would purchase all of the equipment and install it. There are options now for us to be able to lease equipment, and so you basically pay a fee for service from a vendor. They'll change it out when the technology is antiquated, but it brings the cost down significantly. And so that's something we've been working with ADS on to find what's the sweet spot to connect with buying the equipment, leasing the equipment. How do we organize it? What facilities do we prioritize? That's some of the back end work that we're doing with ADS now. But we think that actually provides us some better opportunities, but it also lowers the cost significantly, which we appreciate.
Great. So you're now fully engaged with ADS on this project.
That's right.
Rev Clapton?
And following up on the buy versus lease question, lease implies annual payments.
Yeah, so there'll be essentially a fee for service that we pay. There's some money, I think, available in the IT modernization funding that's already in place through ADS. And then we would look to build this into our base budget going forward once we got the project off this.
And do you happen to have a rough sense of if you purchase the system, how much that would be and what the annual maintenance would be versus how much the annual lease is going to be?
Yeah, so when we did the analysis is about 2 years old because we've been seeking funding for that whole period. When we did the analysis a couple of years ago, I think it was about 3.3 million to purchase all the equipment and then the state would install it. And I think the annual maintenance was pretty low. Under the new model, we don't have a precise figure yet, but we think that it'll be significantly lower. Higher annual fee, but much lower in the overall product cost, and the replacement cost wouldn't be there. So we wouldn't be 3-4 years down the road being like, okay, now that technology is outdated, we need new technology. We go with the service provider to do that work.
Southworth and then Bailey.
Thank you. So have you gone into an RFP for the lease, or how does that work?
Well,
and what would the term of that lease be?
Yeah, we can't enter into an RFP until we have the funding. So we have not gone through that process yet. So basically, we've done all of our due diligence homework. We need a couple of updates, and with ADS, we're working with the vendors who do provide internet service in the facilities right now to do some reorganization to make room for this work. But we would expect that we would go out for that process once we have the funding.
And with that, you're asking for $1 million, but do you know what that'll actually cover?
So I would expect that would cover the project cost. Give us enough runway to put out RFP, figure out the exact pricing, and then buy that pricing for at least a year. And I think probably longer than that, so that we could then build that into future budgets in a DOC base.
Thank you.
Yep.
And to follow up, what's the length of the lease you'd expect to enter into?
That I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, I think we'd take our cues from ADS on that, knowing that they typically have the expertise on the IT contracts.
Is that going to be $1 million a year?
No, I don't think so. I think that the annual cost will be quite a bit lower than that, but I don't think we're going to know that until we get the RFP bids back.
Rev Morrow? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just one, have you had any further discussions with the Christine's Halquist group about, they said they were gonna come back to see you folks?
Yeah, I haven't. That is something that we're very interested in. And continues to be. And I think it's something that, from the administration's perspective, this is a population that's outlined, identified in the underlying federal support that was given to the state or promised to the state anyway. So we do think that this serves a population that's underserved currently in the state and should be deserving of those funds. That's a funding stream we will continue to aggressively pursue.
Okay.
I have lost track of the order. I think Rev Morrow.
Yeah, I was curious if you had time to do any kind of analysis of what you'd save in terms of payroll time or efficiencies, staff efficiencies or recruitment. Now you were talking about the workforce aspect of
Yeah.
this. It seems like there's potential savings there on multiple levels. Is that?
No, I very much agree with you. I think that's our aim, is to create those savings. We don't have an analysis of how, the overtime we'd offset yet. I think we've tried to do that in other spaces not related to this project, and it's often difficult for us to anticipate, but we're really good at measuring it backwards. So for example, we set up a hospital coverage team. This gets kind of into the weeds, but basically we set up a team to take over duties of folks who were otherwise on standby or overtime, and they were able to offset 70% of the overtime. So we're able to measure that kind of retrospectively. We would certainly do that here, but I think you're keying in on a really important point, and that is we have much smaller staff than we have had in years and years, and the system is designed for a certain number. Say it's 100%. We're basically at 75% of that. And if you look at the projections for the workforce, out 5, 10, 20, 30 years, we're not getting back to 100%. We just need to be very clear about that. So we've got to fill that gap somehow. And if it's basic supply and demand issue for me, we don't have a supply of staff. The demands on staff are growing. We need to decrease the demands. And so if we can automate tasks, if we can move to these types of models, we will save hours of time, which then we can invest back into the system in a different way. And that's ultimately the theory of why we're pursuing this as a workforce issue.
Sure, yeah. I guess I'm just curious about a couple of technical things. When we were talking about this before, we were talking about having two separate systems, one for the staff and one for the incarcerated population. That still would be the plan.
Well, so there'd be one state system. So the incarcerated population have access to the internet for their personal use on a tablet. And I say they have access to the internet. I mean, it's a truncated internet system. So they're able to do some messaging. They're able to do some email. Then there's learning resources on there. There's some mental health resources. There's some media that they can rent. There's some for free and some that they can purchase. So that's their access for kind of personal use. What we're talking about is having a Wi-Fi system in the facilities that's owned by the state for the state's purpose. And so that's to deliver services to the population, like vocational training, career technical education, like our CCV programs. And that also can be used for these other workforce projects. So it's one system that is has the opportunity to serve both populations, but for the state's mission, not as a, hey, I want, I'm in C block and I want to get on the internet. That's not an opportunity that'd be available.
I followed you up until that.
Meaning there won't be access from an individual incarcerated person to use the system for whatever purpose they want. They would be accessing it through an education system like TCP.
Through the tablets that are provided. Yeah, okay.
Their tablets won't touch this system, but yes, they would be able to access. So if an incarcerated individual were in a community college of Vermont program, they have specific technology that they use. It is also locked, so they can only use it for certain purposes. That would access this system. That's distinct from their tablet system.
Oh, okay. So the separation is in the devices. not in the Wi-Fi system. The Wi-Fi system is a signal
So
system.
it's actually both.
Okay. Maybe we
Yeah.
don't get into further detail. On the other part that I was curious about is whether staff personal cell phones would be able to access the system, or is that something that the staff are not allowed to carry?
So as it stands now in the state of Vermont, staff are not allowed to carry personal cell phones or electronic devices into the facilities. Some staff have state issued devices. That's usually a supervisor, the superintendent of a facilities, more senior staff. Those devices certainly could access this. I mean, I'll tell you, like I have a state issued cell phone, of course. When I go into correctional facility, it doesn't work because you can't get
There's no Wi-Fi.
there's no Wi-Fi and the cell coverage doesn't penetrate the wall. So they're functionally, useless. You're just carrying around, a pound of metal.
Got it.
So there would be access for state-owned devices. I'll tell you, I mean, there has been a debate nationally about whether correctional staff should be permitted to bring in personal cell phones. I think that's something to consider in the future, but we wouldn't expect that they would be connected to this Wi-Fi system.
Okay, thanks.
And Commissioner, just because it's relevant to this, I just want to clarify something that did come up in our conversations last time. The ability of your residents to take CCD classes that's an existing service that you offer. This would change
To an extent.
the way in which your ability to offer them in an asynchronous way, or perhaps more broadly.
That's right. So right now, CCD courses are taught in person.
Right.
And so that obviously has limitations, both in scale and also when and how people can access the courses. Under this program, we would expand that to be both remote learning. So those are classes that are happening at the same time. So I could be an incarcerated individual in Rutland and be taking classes at CCD Williston remotely, real time. So there's students sitting in CCD Williston and I'm sitting in Rutland in my cell or in the education space taking that class while it's happening. And asynchronous. And that would be, you kind of learn on your own time. So you could be sitting, it'd be 9 o'clock at night, you have your education tablet and you're taking CCD classes. And so you can see that the catalog of available courses begins to expand rapidly. If I can take any course that's in the catalog asynchronously or remotely when those courses are offered, you get a lot more options than, we have 2 CCD instructors this week and they're teaching, Psych 101. That's the only thing you can take. But if I want to get a certificate in a career technical education model, or, I want to even take, basic kind of working towards an associate degree program, it's going to be a lot more difficult if the only way we can do those programs is in person, because the frequency at which you could participate is a lot smaller. And so that's, and talking with CCB, which we have a joint center that we work on this through, that's really the biggest limitation of the program right now is they can't offer the number of courses that they would like, that we would like, because it's much more difficult if you have to do all of that in person in 6 different facilities across 6 states.
Okay. We have, I think, Rep. Sebelia, Howland, and Kleppner.
Tell me again, this is a request that's being made to the Appropriations Committee,
So
general fund dollars.
yeah, so we've heard from the legislature, largely outside of this body, but that there is high interest in getting Wi-Fi in the facilities, and they wanted us to explain what the benefit, the value of that is. We provided that here now twice in HCI and the Senate Institutions Committee. We think that about $1 million is where we would need to be. But we have some seed money that we're working with ADS on through the IT Modernization Fund that'll help us do some of the groundwork. And that's kind of where the project's at. And if there is not additional money, then the project will wait another year and we'll have to hold some.
Okay.
Unless, I guess the caveat to that would be, unless we can find funding elsewhere, which we've been trying for the last 3 years, and that's been very challenging.
And so I think I noted that this letter is addressed to the broadband board. Did you say you had or you had not followed up with Director Hallquist, who we had heard from?
I'm not sure which letter you're talking about, but we have met with the board.
Are you Commissioner Demo?
Mhm.
I think there's a letter here under
It's a
your,
draft.
it's not from him.
No.
I apologize.
No, that's
It's
okay.
posted
That's okay.
under your name.
We have, Very good. We have
We'll figure that out.
met with the board several times over the last few years. It's something we continue to engage with. We're going to continue to do that and try to press forward. It's something the legislature has also pressed the board on, has sent letters in the last couple of years.
To the broadband board?
Yeah. And we can provide those. I think we've got copies.
I would like to see those.
Yep, House Corrections sent one, I know, at least last session. And this was a big topic conversation in the Joint Justice Oversight Committee over the summer, although I think it was actually fall last year.
Great. The letter is, it's down. Thanks, Jack. It's a draft, drafted by Corrections, updating the, funding request letter to approbes.
Okay.
So that's what it is.
Great.
It's very drafty. Representative Howland, you all set? Putnam?
Did you say there was a $5 million federal earmark to support the educational programs?
Yep, the Community College of Vermont Education and Corrections. Yep.
How at risk is that earmark given that?
But I mean, that's a good question. So that earmark has been in place for 2 years now, is it? I think it's been two sessions ago that passed Congress. It was put into the justice portfolio for the current congressionally directed spending. I think, your guess is as good as mine on some of this. I think that money is pretty secure because it has been a program in existence for a while. Using history as our guide, maybe that's not a great place here, but in the first Trump presidential administration, there was a high interest in what they call second chance education. And so we hope that will continue. This is a program that fits in that category. But it's difficult to tell right now kind of where everything is going. And so I don't want to try to read the tea leaves too much.
Thank you.
Rep. Bailey?
So yeah, one other follow-up. Would your priority be to automate the employee side of the system first?
Yeah, so I don't think that there'll be a lot of automation necessarily that serves the population. I mean, by extension, our staff serve the population, but the automation work that we talk about is really trying to help bring down the workload on our correctional staff and improve and modernize the system. So we're capturing better data and doing that.
As in the digital records for instead of using paper and pencil.
Yep, that's right. That's for correctional.
I'm there. That's where I want the priority to go.
Exactly.
To help your staff.
I could have a question. Is there any recordable device that they can carry? I equate it to a meter reader going down the street and then come back and download. You said you had Wi-Fi in the office itself. You have
Hardwired internet. Yeah.
But you don't have wireless Wi-Fi. So might there be tools available so they can enter into a pad, come back and download so they're not?
Yeah, there may well be. I mean, certainly there's what they call RFID readers that do something similar to what you're describing. There are some systems that use Bluetooth. Ultimately, all of that technology needs to be installed similar to wireless access points, and we get a lot more bang for the buck, a lot more value out of wireless internet than we do from RFID or Bluetooth. Because a wireless network in a correctional system is more ubiquitous, that we can use it for a variety of different purposes versus simply scanning each cell as you go by. Those types of devices do exist, though, to answer your question.
Okay, so just to make sure everybody's had their questions answered, the clock really is ticking now for our budget letters. So the next thing that we'll see will be probably an updated letter from the Corrections Committee that we'll vote on. So if you have questions about this, at that point, I'm not going to be able to haul in Commissioner Demo. So now is your chance to get your questions answered. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have questions for Commissioner Demo, but ADS.
you've been working closely with ADS. I'm not sure we're gonna have time to take additional testimony. I can reach out to them, certainly.
Or if you have a
I
question,
think it would be very helpful.
certainly we can try to provide a written response or something if that's helpful.
I'll email the secretary. All right. Questions?
Just one more.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So with the VCBB funding, I think Director Halquist was looking at some DEI allocations that were in there.
Okay.
And so I'm curious about that as well. So if that funding was not available, do you feel
If what funding, I'm sorry.
VCBB funding?
The Digital Equity Act funding
Mm.
specifically.
Mhm.
I think we're looking for more the BEAD funding. I would defer to the BCBP on that.
Mm.
The non-deployment funding,
Mhm.
but they had articulated might be available.
Okay.
Good. Okay.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
just, I guess maybe a question for just from my understanding from the corrections committee and corrections, is the primary focus of this funding request to the VCBB?
So, I mean, we have tried to go there, I think, several times and not gotten a lot of progress. And we've come to the legislature and asked for help with that and have gotten help trying to ask for those, access to some of those funds. And that hasn't been successful. So, like I said, I will continue to ask and continue to try to move the needle there. But this is the opportunity for the legislature to weigh in on whether it supports programs like this. And if the BCCB funding doesn't seem to be moving and I haven't seen any indication that it's moving, then our only other option at this point is to go to the general fund.
Okay.
That has not been our preference because we think that this is a program that fit neatly in some other buckets, but unfortunately, those have not panned out yet. And we, initially we went to the federal delegation for support on this, and they said, we love these types of programs. We have worked to get Vermont funding, and it went to the VCCB. So that would be where to go to access the federal funds that were supposed to support broadband expansion. So that's kind of how this all started. So when we went to the federal delegation to ask for support, earmarks or other ways that the federal government can support funding, they pointed us to the money that the federal government had already directed for Vermont for broadband expansion. And that money comes into Vermont and my understanding goes to the board for allocation. They make decisions on where it should go and then dispersing. And so that's how we got started with the board in the first place. Hey, that's where the money is. Go there and ask. And it was highlighted to us that serving incarcerated populations was one of the groups that the federal government had called out in its work in broadband expansion.
Okay. And so supporting a staff qualifies for supporting
In our
incarcerated
interpretation, certainly.
Sure. Okay. And are there any other state institutions where we're looking for our broadband dollars to be
That and that
for
aware
infrastructure,
of.
state infrastructure?
ADS may anybody answer that?
But this specific request is general fund money down from 3 million to 1 million, supported by the government.
I'm not hearing general money.
Yeah.
Sure, that's what we're trying to get after that. Sure.
So
Yes.
Well, if the board were able to support this, I think that would be a great option. But again, that hasn't come to fruition.
any,
Kevin Winter from Corrections and Institutions. To date, our committee was very supportive because of the overload on corrections officers and other staff. We need more, and if this can improve their efficiencies and improve retention, that's really good. And to go from the 3 million to 1 million and know that the equipment's going to be maintained at the right level rather than having to replace it regularly, that seemed to make really good sense. So I think we're fully on board, and Chair, Emmons has basically told us to take a very complicated letter and make it very simple that says we support. So unless there's something more from your group, that's what you're gonna see is we support program.
That's great. And we're gonna vote on what you sent us.
Understand.
So,
Unless you want something more in the letter, we can be a lot more specific, but that's what the letter will basically say. Is institution corrections see this is a viable use of $1 million to improve the efficiencies and opportunities for rehabilitation in corrections.
great. I'll check in the chair ends on that.
Yeah, I would just encourage us to be really flexible on where those funds are coming from
Yeah.
and not descriptive.
Yes.
Thank
All
you
right,
very much. I
Commissioner, thank
appreciate
you
it.
for joining us.
Absolutely.
All right, guys.